as we were talking about many other characters that are there, let's look at Tara first of all. Tara is the one of the wives of Mathur Ghosh. Has a younger wife named Champak also. But Tara is the mistress of the house, as we are told. With Tara again comes that kind of a strength that we see in Matangini. Uh, Tara, though, uh, is kept within the domesticities of the house, and you see when we are talking about Tara in this chapter 17, where it's called the vigilance of love. Again, someone who is in love sincerely with her husband. If we see a kind of a transgressive love with Matangini, here with Tara, she loves her husband, but her husband probably does not love her as much as he loves his younger wife. But Tara's love is steadfast, and though unhappy at not getting the attention that she should, but she remains very loyal to her husband. You are unhappy, she says. May one who sincerely loves you learn the cause. She says, she asks. Mathur gave a start, but Mathur tries to deflect and says, "Why? Who told you that? What have I to grieve for?" "Do not try to deceive me, love," returned Tara in a tone of earnest but affectionate remonstrance. "I know you care little for me or my love, but to a woman, her husband is, I cannot say what he is not. Deceive the world, but you cannot deceive me." So, in a sense, Tara is that moral foundation on which Mathur Ghosh's house kind of flowers and his entire being flowers. "You are surely mad to think me wretched, Mathur," said Mathur, in a tone what is most significantly contradicted in his words. "What put this fancy in you? Yourself. Listen, you have many things to think of: your taluks, your lawsuits, your rent, your kacheris, your houses, gardens, and servants, and much more." And she points out to the distinction: "I have nothing to care for but my husband and my daughter. So my life is restricted to only very few things. So that's why if anything happens to either of these, my husband or my daughter, I will know. Do you wonder then for what last 3 days I have noted before others that your step had lost its wonted pride, that your eyes wandered and had a strange look, that you spoke less often, that when your smile came not from your heart, nay, you can you suppose that a mother's eye would forget the note that his child met not from its father, his former warm embrace? Yes, often during these 3 days has Bindu, the daughter, held your finger and played around your knee, and you have not spoken to her. And even my sister," here an arch smile, which passed off as soon as it came, momentarily interrupted earnestness of Tara's manner, "and even my sister has pouted and stormed, and you have not listened with your wonted courtesy and sigh. Can you longer deny that something troubles you?" Then Tara pushes. "Do you think of me worthy of sharing your griefs?" continued Tara, seeing that her husband did not reply. "I know you do not love me, uh, but you can confide with me." That has an impact, and "You are unhappy, conceal it not, deceive it not," sobbed rather than uttered Tara, with an intensity of agony in the stifled tones of her voice and beyond the power of language. "Deceive me not, conceal not, tell me, if my life will purchase your happiness, you can yet be happy." But Mathur does not tell her. Mathur just implies, "I have not been happy." And at this time, a sound comes and he goes out, and Tara follows him and finds out what is happening. And she finds the keys, and she actually unlocks the entire crucible here, the puzzle that is here. And she opens the door so that she can find Madhav, who we are told was a playmate with Tara. So they have known each other as brothers and sisters, kind of a thing. So We are also told about another angle of Tara, but we also why Tara is important as a kind of a as a kind of distinction from Matangini, as well as a complement to Matangini's representation of Matangini, is because Tara remains within the folds of domesticity, complying with her domestic duties and silently guarding and protecting her husband. But when she realizes that there is something wrong, much like Matangini, when she realizes that her husband Rajmohan was doing something that was wrong, they both don't hesitate to go beyond the boundaries of the domestic. And that's why Tara also transgresses into the domain of what is supposed to be the domain of the men, goes into the Godown Mahal and to her utter surprise, finds Madhav. Much like Matangini, who stepped out of the house when she overheard the conversation about the dacoitry that was supposed to take place at Madhav's house. Through this entire kind of spectrum of characters of women, we see that women are not just passive presences here in Bankim's world. They are very active agents uh, who make changes happen, who alter the course of the novel itself, who alter the course that the men have taken and thwart their design itself. By the end of the novel, the the plot is thwarted. Madhav is recovered, so is Matangini, and Matangini obviously, because of the circumstances and what I was telling you about the excessive desire that cannot be subsumed within the walls of domesticity, has to be sent to her father's house. Very interestingly, we need to read the last chapter here, and that tells us something about what how the novel ends. And we reach the end of the novel, and we are told that Matangini has gone to her husband's. Matangini has gone to her father's house because she can't go back to obviously Madhav. So we don't reach a conclusion in the desired sense where lovers unite. As I said, both the women are transgressive in the sense Tara and Matangini, and both of them have the same fate. Matangini could not live under Madhav's roof. This is, of course, they both understood. So, intimation was sent to her father. He came and took her home. Madhav increased the pension and everything. But history does not say how her life terminated, but it's known that she died an early death. Tara, who mourned the terrible end of her husband, will come back to that part. Mathur dies by the end of the novel. Tara mourns it, and she also dies. So we are told that these women who are excessive in that sense, the novel does not know what to do with them. And that's also partly what Bankim cannot decide what a good ending to the novel. And that's why you see a kind of a hurried wrapping up that happens. By the end of the novel, you see a kind of a hurry to tie all the details and tie all the nodes, and therefore everything ends. And this kind of a ending is also a very Victorian, borrowed from Victorian realist novel, where at the end of a Victorian realist novel, you are told what happens next, that what happened, that they came together and then lived forever, and like they were happily married or something of that sort. But here, that does not come together, and this is what the inconsistent part of the novel, the uneven nature of the novel that I was telling you about. Probably Bankim was, after it was serialized, Meenakshi Mukherjee tells us, probably it did not garner the kind of attention Bankim had expected. So probably he got disenchanted, and partly the reason why he never wrote in English again. So we don't see him very enthusiastic, and Mukherjee contends that is the reason for the hurried wrap up. The last chapter, very interestingly, does all of that, and but then it does not in the Victorian idiom though. It does in the idiom that you would have seen in Indian tales itself. I have brought my story to a close, and now I'll tell you what all happens and how things end. Some things will go on, some things will live on. As he says, as Madhav Champak and the rest, some are dead and others will die, throwing this flood of light on their past and future history. I bid you, good reader, farewell. Victorian idiom that is borrowed, but also the Katha tradition that, like, we don't know what happened, some people have died, some will die. That line is a typical borrowing from some of the Indian indigenous tradition of tale telling. Now, to get back to what happens to Mathur, that's a very interesting part of the novel, and I had spoken about this before, that the only presence, only colonial presence explicitly that we have is that of the Irish magistrate. We are told that a shrewd and restlessly active Irishman sat in the district station as magistrate. It was his besetting sin to be meddling with everything. He was constantly shaking out ugly affairs of the police, but Mathur was promised that that Bhiku should not recant before the meddlesome Irishman. But he says that this Irishman is a very upright person, and he is someone who restores order here. Next morning, the busy Irishman came to Mathur Ghosh's house to arrest him personally. A whole posse of policemen following at his heels in 100 variety of dresses, and an eager rabble pressing close upon them to have a peep at the sort of animal they call a magistrate and the pranks he liked to play. Arrived at the house, it was entered, thoroughly ransacked for the owner, but he was not to be found. At the length he was found there in the godown mahal, in the very room which had formed the prison of Madhav and so many others victims. The master of the house was found dead. He had hanged himself. So we see that the British official is not criticized here. And the British, on the other hand, the colonial presence is not a disruptor. It's actually someone who restores order to their worlds here. So it's very interesting then to rethink the idea of colonialism and its impact on the novel itself. As I said in the beginning of these lectures, you will see that constantly one is reminded here that novel in Bankim's hand in Rajmohan's Wife is not directed towards an anti-colonial struggle or a criticism of colonial policies in that sense. What it is geared towards is these everyday negotiations that are taking place. The everyday negotiations mark the novel in that sense. So, what Bankim's criticism is towards gender relations, the hypocrisy of nativist assertions about social realities and social relationships. What we get to see again and again is a constant articulation for the need of change. Change at the level of domesticities. So, here the emphasis is more on the inside, or the Zenana, as he would say, the emphasis is more on the inside rather than on the outside. But it would also be harmful to make that distinction that the outside does not exist at all. Because, as you remember, the novel is situated here and the plot moves on because it's about a legal document. That there is the third son of Bangshibodhan had left a will uh, which is at the center of this entire domestic struggle that ensues. So, colonial law, and they are fighting it in a court, and that's why they want to replace the original will, which is with Madhav, with a fake one, so that they can win a court case, and Mathur can take away the third his uncle, his uncle's property from Madhav, who was legally the heir. So, the outside obviously impinges on the inside, that's why the domestic struggles ensue. But the domestic is the center of his deliberation on 19th century India. And it's very fascinating to see how gender occupies the center stage here. Gender becomes the primary site around which Bankim constructs his critique of colonialism. That with the coming of colonial modernity, with the coming of education, with the coming of new values, you start seeing changes that disrupt our older ways of living. Bankim's sympathy, as I was talking about in the earlier lectures, Bankim's sympathy for transgressive love outside domestic boundaries, outside monogamous marriages, is something that is an offshoot of modernity itself. The assertion of personal will, which violates societal norms, is again an offshoot of modernity. If one goes on to think about the way the novel is arranged, it is also an offshoot of that modernity. An example of that will be the 5th chapter, which I briefly want to draw your attention to. The 5th chapter, which is called, which gives us an introduction into the Zanana. Let me just locate the pages, and it will be it's instructive to look at this brief description so that we understand his approach towards the world itself. This visit to a Zanana again is almost anthropological. Here, novel becomes a method to capture the inner circles of Indian life that were not available to others. In that way, novel becomes part of that anthropological gaze. If you read this, he goes into this is where the letter comes in, and letter saying that there is a case that is filed and everything, that that his aunt at the behest of Mathur Ghosh has gone and sued them in the court, saying that no, they have forcibly kept me, and that it will be that my property should be given to Mathur in that sense. So, in order to find his aunt, he goes into the Zanana, and we are given a very detailed description of the Zanana. Madhav's first thought after he had finished the perusal of the letter was to go seek his aunt. Madhav therefore immediately hurried into the inner apartments, where he found no very easy task to make himself heard in that busy hour of Zanana life. There were servant women, black and rotund and eloquent, demanding transmission to her hand, sundry articles of domestic use, without, however, making it all intelligible to those whom her demands were particularly addressed. There was another who boasted similar blessed corporal dimension, but who had thought it beneath her dignity to shelter them from the view, was busily employed, a broomstick in her hand. A third had ensconced her in that corner of the yard which had formed the grand receptacle of household filth, was employed in employing all her energy in scouring some brass pots. Then there are the cook herself, far removed from the scene where both her spiritual and temporal prospects were being so fiercely dealt by the excited scourer of the brass pots. So you see entire anthropological description that the novel participates in. The novel gives you an insight into the inner sanctums of Indian life in that way. So that's why you start seeing a kind of a negotiation here. Is novel then participant in the colonial gaze? Is the question that can be asked here. And that's part of that transaction and negotiation that I'm talking about, which Bankim was participant in. And from this negotiation, you can see the use of the words, the Indian realities that impinge in, right? So, if the description is of an Indian zanana, the inner courtyards, the realities come into a novel form that is from the West. And you can see the interesting inhabitations of these diverse elements that are there in this novel. To conclude, one can think about these various discourses that come in, right? So that's why the novel is not a easy read in that sense. Salman Rushdie called it a melodramatic dud, the beginning of Indian English novel, Rajmohan's Wife, in that sense, because there's a lot of melodramatic moments that are there. Obviously, Indians are drawing that idea of melodrama, as I was telling you, from Priya Joshi's account, from reading Victorian novels at this point of time, melodramatic Victorian novels. And also the melodramatic tradition that we so much love in our own indigenous forms of expression. But it is also informative for us to take a look at all these different diverse discourses. Bankim may not have been able to put them all together in the way probably he would have wanted, because his dissatisfaction with the novel is very clear, because he doesn't come back to writing in English. But why we are deliberating on this novel even today is because it shows us how Indian English novel was born and how it tried to, probably unsuccessfully, bring many different diverse realities, traditions and forms of expression together. Things that probably do not sit well together. And because they don't sit well together, that's why the seams are very visible. We can see the inconsistencies. For example, use of the word salad, Billingsgate. The inconsistency also is visible in terms of the nature of the text itself. The 3 chapters are back translated, another one is the rest of it is in English, and you have constantly notes that are given by Brajendranath Banerjee as part of the text itself. So, that is at the level of textuality itself. If you look at thematically, it brings in many diverse discourses. We have talked about the idea of transgressive love, ideas of desire, Indian society, domestic feud, discourses of law and colonial governance. Many of them probably do not fit together, and that's why there is a hurried end at the end and the inconsistency that are there. If you look at the form itself, there is the Kavya tradition, the Indian way, indigenous way of tale telling, and then also the novel itself. Again, they come into clash with each other, and we see again a very uneven nature of it. But all of this informs us of very important realities of 19th century novel itself, that it was inhabiting a multilingual and a multi-discourse existence. So that's why the legal discourse, as you could see here, in terms of the letters that come in from the from the lawyer, are also part of the scene of the novel itself, right? So that's why you can see the different vocabulary itself. To sea of glory, your servant has been engaged in conducting your honor's lawsuits at the station with great carefulness and hopes that he will succeed in all of them. We are that's interspersed with novelistic description, and again it gives me great pain to have you inform that this day your aunt has by proxy instituted a suit against you in the principles of the Ramin court, alleging that her husband's will is forgery and claiming that the whole estate is with Wasilat. I do not know who gave her such counsel, and but your servant has made many inquiries, knowing well that someone must have counselled it, and he has heard who it is. Great men are there at her back, but do not think your honor has anything to fear. The will is in truth real, as I know, and where there is virtue, there is victory. But there is necessary. It is necessary to be cautious. It would be advisable to give wakalatnamas to babus and wakils of the judge's court, as well as to engage another from Sadr court on necessary occasion. Barristers from Supreme Court also need to be engaged when the parties join join issue, as well as at the final hearing. Your servant will do all in his power and will try for the case even with his life. He wants your honor's orders, obedient to orders. Gokul Chandra Das. So you see a quasi-legal language, because it's a letter that has come from his legal consultant. So we see these diverse discourses that are very proximate to the novel acting upon it, and that gives us a picture, a very comprehensive picture of uh, of 19th century, with its domesticities, with the history of Bengal, from Calcutta to East Bengal, where Bankim imagines a very different world itself. Bankim's imagined community, to quote Benedict Anderson at this point of time, is not stopping at the border that we now think of in terms of post 1947 realities. He talks about a nation at this point of time of the India before partition, the British India, where East Bengal, today's Bangladesh, is also part of his narrative scape. So we, through Bankim's novel, we get a very different and a pertinent picture of 19th century. The novel is representative of colonial negotiation, not an anti-colonial tirade. So that's why the critique is more inward, keeping in with the tradition of Bengali literature at this point of time, as many commentators have alerted us to, that the critique was much inward, geared towards colonial bureaucracy and people who are participants in colonial modernity itself, participant in the cosmopolitanism of Calcutta. That's why fun is being made of the emergent zamindars or the nouveau rich. Yet it is not, at this point, is aimed at the British itself, which presents to us a very complicated picture of 19th century and the first Indian English novel itself.